Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to the Insider Insight Show. I am honored to have back with me someone who is an incredible patriot, an incredible freedom fighter, and has been fighting for the freedom and the liberty of every American, frankly, every person of the world, for many decades. He also is an individual who has been targeted by whatever you want to call him. The deep state, the globalist syndicate, the globalist cult, the logocracy, the New World Order crowd, because he has told and continues to tell people what they need to know, and it's not what the syndicate wants people to know. He has been decades ahead of the curve, and yet another reason why he has been targeted. Craig has been a regular on this platform for over a decade. And we're going to get into this at the beginning part of the interview with Lieutenant Colonel Craig Roberts, but everybody's making this big to-do about Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson talking about this source he has about our government, and in particular the CIA being involved in the Kennedy assassination. Well, in addition to Lieutenant Colonel Roberts being an incredible hero and a veteran and a Purple Heart recipient and a member of the Tulsa Police Department for many years, he's also a phenomenal author. And he has written a number of books as it relates to the Kennedy assassination. And he has spoken about this for over a decade on our platform. So when Tucker Carlson's saying, and everybody's like, oh, wow, who would have thought? My wife looked at me and she goes, do these people read? Because Lieutenant Colonel Roberts has written about this for many years. And do these people listen? Because Lieutenant Colonel Roberts has been on your show for over a decade saying all this and more. A little background on Lieutenant Colonel Craig Roberts. He's a 27-year veteran of police officer of the Tulsa, Oklahoma Police Department. He's now retired. While an officer, he served in the Patrol Division, Bomb Squad, Tactical Squad, the SWAT team. As a sniper, fugitive warrant squad, the police academy instructor, and police helicopter pilot. He was the only Tulsa Police Department officer assigned to work with the FBI in Oklahoma City bombing, of which, by the way, they still want to forget that because he was the most honest guy there, and that's the last thing they wanted. He, as mentioned, has retired from the Tulsa Police Department. Prior to that, he is a U.S. Marine Vietnam veteran where he served with the 9th Marines as an infantryman and sniper. Among many decorations, he was awarded the Purple Heart, the Vietnam Cross of Gallantry, the Presidential Unit Citation, and after being discharged from the Marines for wounds he suffered in Vietnam, he later enlisted in the Oklahoma National Guard in an infantry scout platoon. After being promoted to staff sergeant, he attended officer candidate school and graduated as a second lieutenant. He continued to serve in various capacities from platoon leader to company commander when he transferred to the Army Reserve and worked in the intelligence field. He retired after 30 years total service. He is also currently an NRA certified rifle, pistol, and shotgun instructor and also teaches Oklahoma handgun license classes and police and military sniper classes. Craig is also, as I mentioned, a phenomenal author. He has written many books. Kill Zone, A Sniper's Look at Dealey Plaza, The Medusa Files, Crimes and Coverups of the U.S. Government, JFK, The Dead Witnesses, and The Medusa File 2, The Politics of Terrorism in the Oklahoma City Bombing. His website, these books are all available, plus many more, riflewarrior.com. Riflewarrior.com. It's my honor to have back with us our good friend and patriot, Lieutenant Colonel Craig Roberts. Craig, welcome back to the Operation Freedom platform and the Insider Insight Show.
Well, thanks, Dave. It's good to see you again.
Well, you too. And Craig, a happy new year.
Well, you too.
Craig, I want to just read to you a real brief little thing that was sent to me and your take. Actually, when I first saw it, I thought, hey, did Craig Roberts write this? Here's what it says. The real conspiracy theorists believe that the government cares about them, that the media would never mislead or lie to them, and the pharmaceutical industry that makes billions off sickness wants to cure them. End quote. Craig, did you write that? Because I got this. I said, I think Craig wrote this.
No, but I could have.
Yeah, you really could have. So, Craig, I mentioned some of the books you've written, and let's first focus on this Kennedy assassination issue because it's gotten, if you will, no pun intended, a new life because with these big revelations through Tucker Carlson that the government was involved in the Kennedy assassination. Now, Craig, you studied this for many years. You actually spent time from a marksman side of this because you're a far better marksman than, quote, Lee Harvey Oswald ever was, or even if he even fired something that day in November of 1963. Craig, give us your take on what happened in Dealey Plaza in November of 1963 with the assassination of President Kennedy.
Well, there was a lot of factors first that led up to it. And when I got into it, I had flown one of our helicopters down to Dallas to a police helicopter convention that was going to last 3 days in Arlington. And since I flew down, I didn't have any ground transportation, so I rented a car. And the second day there, they had some classes going that I didn't care about. And I thought, well, I'm going to drive around and see what's around here. And I looked at the map and wasn't too far from a place called Dealey Plaza. Mm-hmm. So I drove over there. The crime scene of the century, and I'd never seen it. And I was amazed how small the place was. It wasn't a huge, giant park that you think, you know. Mm-hmm. And it was fairly small and kind of triangular in shape. And so I wandered around a little bit, and I ended up going. They just opened the sixth floor museum, school book depository. So I went up there. I looked around, and I thought, this is the Lee Harvey Oswald did it by himself Memorial Museum, because they only had like one little display that, oh, by the way, there are conspiracy theories.
Yeah, right.
The rest was all the government's version of this thing. Well, I found out later from a good friend of mine, Jim Mars, a late friend. He passed about a year and a half ago from cancer, unfortunately. And he'd written the book Crossfire, The Plot to Kill Kennedy. Very good book, great guy. And he told me that, hey, the guy that runs the museum is a government shill. And he says, I know who it is. And he says, I'm not going to, say anything about, anything else about him other than the fact that there's no way that museum's ever going to really present what really happened. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, while I was up on the sixth floor, I walked over to right next to the so-called assassin's window. Mm-hmm. I looked out and down at the street, and I thought, there's no way in hell that this could happen. But, first, after I read all the other stuff, and I didn't know that much about it. I mean, I was in high school. I was in my senior class of 64. This was in November 63 when I came over the PA system that Kennedy had been shot in Dallas and was being rushed to Parkland Hospital. Mm-hmm. And then later on, they came back, and of course, they let us off for the rest of the school day. And Monday, by then, they had captured Lee Harvey Oswald, and they figured they had their man in the story. And then Jack Ruby gets arrested for shooting Oswald, and then he dies of cancer within about a year, I think it was. And he told him, if you can't get me out of Dallas to Washington, D.C., I can't tell you what really happened. And the Warren Commission would not move him out of Dallas. Mm-hmm. And so that case closed, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what we're all told. Mm-hmm. Well, now, years go by. I've been to Vietnam. I've held a sniper rifle and shot different distances at live human beings. And I look out the window and I go, this guy's shooting a Mannlicher Carcano 6.5, which is not the world's best rifle by any means. In fact, it was called the humane rifle because it's only been thrown down twice and not been shot in the war. So, but anyway, and I had one when I was a kid. They were like $10 a piece at the Army surplus store. They had barrels of them. Mm-hmm. And and I looked out the window and I go, oh, wait a minute. He made 3 shots in 5.6 seconds from this position in a moving car, going around a bend, down a hill, and through the trees. And his last shot was the best one, and that was a headshot. Wrong answer. I knew immediately, right then, I threw the BS flag down on that and said the government lied. Mm-hmm. They lied to all of us all this time. What else did they lie to us about? Mm-hmm. Well, I started researching the Kennedy thing. I got home, and I had accidentally at one time recorded the VHS tape of this Zapruder film.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I know the Zapruder film has been altered by Life magazine when they got it and all that. I know the whole story on that. But the thing about it was, they couldn't alter it enough.
Right.
And what I saw on the final shot, the headshot, it came from the front. It did not come from the rear. It came from the front. And on top of that, I could tell what kind of bullet it was. It was a mercury-filled hollow point, because the way you see the impact on the front of the skull,
mm-hmm.
look at it, and particles go up and down.
Mm-hmm.
That did not happen on a shot like that. It did blow out the back.
Right.
But you see pieces going straight up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
That does not happen with a solid bullet. And so I'm going, wait a minute. And his head jerks
back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Head jerks back.
Yeah, so Dan Rather was too busy telling the country, oh, his head moved violently forward and to the right, forward and to the left. Well, in fact, the Zapruder film showed. Wait a minute, Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it exposed Rather as being a government shill at that point, which is why he kind of worked his way up the totem pole so quickly. But go ahead, Craig.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I saw that, and the reason I knew that is because we talked about it in the sniper community for a long time, what a mercury-filled bullet will do. Mm-hmm. And all you do is you drill out a hollow point, you put mercury in it, and you cover it over with liquid solder or paraffin. And when it happens, or when it shoots and hits the object, it actually goes like this, it collapses, and then blows this way, but the mercury keeps going in. Now, why do you want the mercury to go in? Because there's no ballistics. You can't recover a bullet. And years later, when I was down in Dallas doing a seminar down there, mm-hmm. I talked to one of the doctors that were in Parkland in the ER when they brought him in, mm-hmm. and he had brought some X-rays mm-hmm. of the skull, mm-hmm. The head. And I looked at him, and I was talking to him, and he says, I'm not real sure what all these little white specks are.
Mercury.
Yeah. I said, those are droplets of mercury. They're metal. That's why they show up white on the X-ray. He says, well, that explains a lot of things then. And he wouldn't talk about it after that. But anyway, I saw the actual X-rays that did show that. And there was one guy, during all my years of research, I found out that always used a mercury-filled bullet. And his name was Lucien Sarti. He was French-Corsican mafia hitman. He was in the OAS in France and tried to assassinate de Gaulle. And his code name was the Jackal. Mm. And he had two other Corsicans with him, a George Boccagnini and a Xavier Peronte, and they were stationed at two different places in the plaza so that Kennedy would be caught in a crossfire. And I put all this down in my book, Kill Zone. Mm-hmm. And the thing about it is that these media people that back this Oswald did it by himself deal don't understand. Mm-hmm. You don't take someone who's never killed anybody before mm-hmm. and have them coolly make those three shots and not have no qualms about it at shooting not only a human being but the president of the United States. Right. You think he's not going to have buck fever?
You bet he is.
Yeah, and the rifle itself was never used. Mm-hmm. The reason is, if you look at the pictures, the scope had to be rotated 90 degrees to the left to move the windage knob up instead of on the side so they could use a charger clip to load the magazine. Mm-hmm. When they did that, it put everything out of kilter, and the FBI, when they tried to test fire the rifle later, they had to shim the scope to even get it on target at close range. So, and then it uses a 6-round in-block clip. It's a clip that fits down, and it's like the M1 rifle. When you strip the last bullet off and chamber it, the clip falls out the bottom so that you can put another one in. Mm-hmm. No clip was found on the 6th floor. Supposedly, he fired 3 shots from that and 1 live round, and it was found in the chamber. Well, 1 live round was found in the chamber, but only 2 pieces of brass were found on the ground. Mm-hmm. And I've got both reports from the Dallas PD and from Texas Department of Public Safety, who also investigated it, and they're both the same report except one thing. The one that went to the Warren Commission shows 3 empty cases. One that actually was in the archives only showed 2, and plus the pictures only showed 2. Now, if he's hit with a minimum of 3 shots, what's wrong with this picture? And it just gets worse and worse. And if you count the ballistic damage in Dealey Plaza, the hits on him, the car, across the overpass to where it hit a curb and it hit a bystander there named James Tagg in the cheek, you're ending up with about 7 shots.
And the Connolly wounds.
Oh yeah, you got Connolly who was hit twice.
Right.
And this magic bullet.
Oh yeah, courtesy of Arlen Specter, and his payoff for that was to become a U.S. senator.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was his payoff.
Yes. Magic bullet. I wish I had some of those. That'd be nice. I wouldn't have to aim or anything. Just shoot it somewhere and it'll hit the target.
Make you a more effective sniper if you had a bunch of those magic bullets, huh?
Yeah.
Well, when he was apprehended, if that's what you want to call it, and he did this little thing before the press, before they shut him up, tied that loose end up, he said, I'm a patsy. Yeah. Well, in fact, Craig, he wasn't lying.
No. He said, so I'm the patsy.
Yeah.
So he knew about the whole thing. He was involved in it.
Yeah.
But he says, so I'm the patsy.
Right.
Thinking it should have been somebody else. Why me? Mm-hmm. You know? And
now, Craig. So you believe the evidence is consistent with the fact that Oswald never fired that weapon on that day?
Absolutely, because when they tried to do a powder residue burn on his hands and his face, they got nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. Test.
Okay, so Oswald was a setup. He was a patsy,
yeah.
Right? Now let's talk about a couple other things. The three that you outlined, it essentially was a turkey shoot, right? Triangulation turkey shoot.
Yep.
Professional assassins.
Right.
Tied to the mafia. And they also, it's my understanding, had ties with, for example, the CIA. Is that fair?
I would say so, because these guys were all in the French underground against the Germans during World War II, and the OSS supported the French underground and trained them and equipped them. And the OSS is what became the CIA in 1947. And then you've got other players involved too. They had backup shooters everywhere. They had. I interviewed a man named of Hoffman, who was a deaf mute who was was in the railroad yard and saw 2 guys behind the picket fence, and one of them was wearing a railroad type coveralls of the time, because it was in the rail yard behind the fence, mm-hmm. and. He had a cloth tool bag, and after he shot, he took the rifle, raised it up, broke it in half like this, put both halves in a tool bag, and walked off and got into a white Rambler and left. And there's another guy with him that went with him at the same time. There's all kinds of other theories that people have written about. I've read all the books. And there's one I talk about that he was shot from a storm drain next to the street with a 1911 45 caliber handgun. Well, if one was fired, it wouldn't have hit him from the angles. I went there and I looked at everything, and on top of that, there was a 45 caliber expended bullet found on the ground right across from the street from there, right across the grass, and there shows a guy in a suit and the old fedora hat walk over, look around, reach down, pick it up, put it in his pocket, and walk off. Mm-hmm. So maybe a 45 was fired from there, but that didn't do any damage. It missed. And why it would land there, I mean, it almost have to go straight up in the air to fall down that close. I don't know. Mm-hmm. There's so many anomalies to this whole thing. And you look at the Tippett deal. Officer Tippett.
A Dallas police officer who was killed that same day.
Yeah, and they blamed it on Oswald, mm-hmm. because they said Tippett stopped him on his way to the Texas Theater. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, wait a minute, okay, stop right there. How did they know he was going to the Texas Theater
right.
on purpose?
Right.
And why would he pick that place? He didn't plan on being inside very long because he didn't buy a ticket. That's what got him in trouble.
Right.
And I went back through all of the stuff I could find on the Tippett killing, And Tippett was involved in this. He was CIA. And he had gone to Lee Harvey Oswald's rooming house to pick him up and take him to the airport to catch a flight in an airplane that was already running, with the pilot was David Ferry, who was CIA. And this is all the old anti-Castro Cuban people we're talking about here. Ferry used to fly arms into Cuba. Then you got the problem with the scene, because a lady down the street saw Tippett parked, saw another car drive up, two guys in suits get out, walk over, and shoot him. And then they get back in the car and leave. Well, the problem with that is they were shooting semi-automatic pistols. They were shooting Colt Super 9s, which back then was the preferred gun. It's a Colt automatic, semi-automatic, which means it ejects the brass on the ground. It's rimless brass. It won't work in a 45 or a 38 revolver because there's no rim to hold it in the cylinder. What gun did they find on Oswald? A 38 Colt revolver, snub nose, with a broken firing pin.
Good luck there.
Yeah. They gave that to him and had him, but he didn't realize it. And so there's no way that gun was used anyway. So Tippett was set up because he knew too much. And so Oswald goes to Texas Theater. He doesn't buy a ticket. He just walks right in and sits down.
Right.
And what happens? The manager calls the police and says, "We got a guy that just busted our gate here. He's inside. He didn't pay for his ticket. We want somebody to come and get him." Well, by the time they got there, it was Oswald. They had him because he evidently was supposed to go out the back door to the alley to get a backup ride to the airport, but he didn't make it in time, or his ride wasn't there. I'm not sure. No one knows. But we do know that he didn't make that connection. So now they got their patsy. They don't need anybody else. They may have had somebody else ready to be framed, but they didn't need it because they got him now. So that's kind of where all of that goes. And there's so much more involved. I looked at it, and there were so many people that hated Kennedy in those days.
Yeah.
And he the mafia wanted him because of Bobby Kennedy. Was after him. The CIA hated his guts
because of Bay of Pigs.
Because of the Bay of Pigs.
And the old, we're going to shatter the CIA into 1,000 pieces, which Allen Dulles was running, right?
Right.
And Dulles was the guy who really founded the CIA in its modern version from the OSS, right?
Exactly.
And Allen Dulles was essentially running the Warren Commission, right?
Pretty much. And the you had John J. McCloy on there.
Oh.
John J. McCloy, they called him the chairman. He's the guy that in World War II was on the staff of the State War Navy Coordinating Committee under FDR, and he's the one that came up with a plan to round up the Japanese Americans on the West Coast and put them in internment camps. He also was in charge of picking out what places in Germany would be bombed and what places would be left alone. And when you go back and you look at all those targets, every target there that was affiliated with a major American corporation or bank was left intact. Those that weren't were destroyed. He picked the targets. And then he became head of the Chase Bank, and he became the High Cog of Germany, High Commissioner of Germany. And at that time, he refinanced and figured out what to rebuild and where to spend the money. Well, where did they get the money? They ended up transferring gold from Fort Knox to the Chase Bank, and from there to the German vault, and from the German vault to Switzerland, to an account in Switzerland. But they paid it back in paper Deutschmarks.
No, how special.
So,
which is why, Craig, there has not been an audit of Fort Knox and our country's gold supply since 1956.
That's right. Because they might find out there's just a wall of gold, and beyond that, there's nothing. Or maybe it's lead painted gold. We don't even know because we're not even allowed to look at it.
Well, and a couple months into the Trump administration, the Secretary of the Treasury, Mnuchin, was sent to Fort Knox. Right? Now, this is a guy who had been not only at Goldman Sachs, criminal banking organization, but also in the movie business. Before he goes in, he goes, wow, wouldn't it make an interesting movie if I went in there and there was no gold? He says this. He goes in, He comes out. No audit was done, obviously, and not in that short a time period, hour and a half. He comes out and he says, quote, "Gold is good." Gold is, yeah, it is good. Yeah. Well, what about what was going on inside that building? Nobody, of course, the dutiful press, part of the syndicate, nobody asked, wait a minute, gold is good. Yeah, great. Okay, come on, buddy. What's in there? Take us in there.
Yeah.
Let's do an assay, live assay. Let's do it. None of that.
Do a tour.
Right. Oh.
Give us a tour.
Can't do that.
Yeah.
So the big revelation several weeks ago on Tucker Carlson's show is this. Quote, "Did the CIA have a hand in the murder of President John F. Kennedy?" According to Carlson, the insider that he has that's reviewed the documents that have yet to be released, there's like 1,000 documents, right? Quote, "The answer is yes. I believe they were involved. It's a whole different country from what we thought it was. It's all fake," end quote. Craig, this is what you have been telling people for decades, been accused of being a conspiracy theorist. You've written books about it with all the documentation, Medusa File 2 on different events. I mean, Craig, what's the news?
Well, a man is never a prophet in his own village.
Well, yeah, good point. So, Craig, one would think, right now we're 1963, here we are, 60 years later, coming up on 60 years in November from that event, and there are 100,000 documents that are still being withheld from the public, which, under the worst case scenario, according to the government, were going to be released in 2017, of which Donald Trump had a couple released, but no, and the same thing with Biden recently. Could it be, Craig, that those documents show absolute conclusive proof that the CIA, the FBI, other government agencies were involved in this hit, and that's why we haven't seen them?
Well, since World War II, at least, there's been a cabal of certain dark players inside each of those organizations, and others as well, including banks, including foreign governments, and so on and so forth. And it's a small clique. I say small, it's not like there's 10,000 people involved. And the smaller they've got it, the better they keep secrets. And anybody can't keep a secret disappears or has, terrible accident, fatal heart attack, commits suicide. If you go to the book I wrote, JFK, The Dead Witnesses, of all the witnesses out there, almost all of them died before they were allowed to testify at one of the 3 investigative hearings. And some, and a lot, people get chopped up with a machete and they say it was suicide.
Right.
Stuff like that. A lot of them, a couple, 3 or 4 of them, went out of a window of a high building. Others were one-car motorcycle or one-car accidents against a bridge abutment. Think Lady Diane. Same thing. Run off the road. In fact, a good friend of mine, Mike Rothmiller, who's also a very good author, is a retired LAPD officer. He was in the Organized Crime Intelligence Unit, and he saw all the files and all kinds of dirt in L.A. while he was working there, and he wrote a book called L.A. Secret Police about it, and they tried to kill him. He moved out of Los Angeles. He worked in L.A., but he moved out of Los Angeles to Huntington Beach. So he's on his motorcycle going home one day on Pacific Coast Highway, and here comes a car up and tries to run him off the cliffs. And he had an accident, got hurt. They ended up giving him a full retirement at 15 years to get rid of him.
Wow.
And so then he moved to Arizona, and he's been writing books ever since. You need to get him on your show.
That'd be great. Now, and we will. We'll work on that through your help. Craig, I want to talk about a couple former presidents that have some potential ties into this event in Dallas. First of all, LBJ. When his car, the vice president, was several cars behind the car Kennedy was in, is it true that with the senator, I think it was Yarborough, that he was in the car with, before any shots rang out, Lyndon Johnson was on the floor of their car, and Yarborough said, "Lyndon, what are you doing on the floor?" Yeah. And then shots rang out. Is that true?
Yeah. Johnson and Kennedy had a big fight that morning at the airport about who was going to ride with who. And Kennedy was adamant that the governor of Texas ride with the president. And John, of course, you can't put the president and vice president in the same car. So Johnson was 2 cars back in a white Cadillac. And Ralph Yarborough, Johnson hated Ralph Yarborough. And he had to ride with him. And he said, I want Ralph Yarborough to ride with you, and I want Governor Connolly to ride with me. And Kennedy said, I'm not going to do that, Lyndon. I'm going to do it my way. And so they evidently had to do some last-minute communications with the shooters, and it didn't get through to everybody. Because when they rounded the 120-degree turn by the Texas School Book Depository to go toward the triple underpass into the kill zone, as soon as they started to turn the corner, Lyndon crawls down on the floor. And Ralph says, what are you doing on the floor, Lyndon? And about that time, he said it sounded like firecrackers going off.
There you go.
Well, a Carcano doesn't sound like firecrackers or a machine gun.
No.
So several shots went off. And one of them came from the west end of the School Book Depository, 6th floor. And it came down, and it hit Connolly in the wrist and in the leg. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we know about the Kennedy was a different direction. But the thing about it was they were really upset that Yarborough wasn't up with, because Yarborough was the other target.
Right.
And so that didn't go down too well, but they didn't care. And going back to who knew about it, the night before all this, there was a big party and a big dinner get together at a ranch outside of Dallas, and Murchison's, I think it was, and they there was a lot of people there, including Will McCloy was there, and so many other. There's one guy in particular. Now, do you remember where you were the day Kennedy got shot?
Yes.
Where?
I was home. I was watching TV. Right? I was like, I don't know, I was like 5. I was watching TV, and Walter Cronkite came on and said, President Kennedy has been shot. I went back. My mom was in the back of the house. I went to my mom and said, Mom, President Kennedy's been shot. And she said, David, that's a terrible thing to say. Never, ever say that again. That is I don't know why you're saying that. It's a terrible thing to say. Now, you go back where you were, and I don't want to hear any more of this. So, about 5 minutes later, she comes in, and I'm sitting there watching all this, right? You know, what's going on? And she goes, what are you doing? Well, I'm not going to answer to her because I just got in trouble for telling her So I look at her, and I don't say anything. She goes, why aren't you talking to me? I go, and I just pointed at the TV. And she goes, oh, my gosh. She goes, you were just telling me what you saw on TV. Yeah. No, that's why I remember it. It was, It's seared in my memory.
Yeah, well, I was in drafting class and my senior year, and I remember it very well, like yesterday. But somebody doesn't remember it. It was at that party. His name was Richard Milhouse Nixon.
And H.W. Bush.
Yeah, Bush was in Dealey Plaza.
Right. So okay. So a couple other presidents. So at this meeting the night before, if I remember correctly, Hoover was there.
Yeah.
J. Edgar Hoover from the FBI.
Right.
Johnson was there, right?
Right.
Nixon was there. Mm-hmm. I believe Dulles was there.
I don't remember.
I think I remember hearing Dulles. But anyway, so there was this meeting. Okay, so Nixon didn't remember where he was.
No. Nixon was an interesting character in all of this stuff because right after all of this, of course, Johnson became president.
Right.
And Nixon went to work for the John Mitchell law firm in New York City. And his first assignment was to go to Southeast Asia.
The old Pepsi contract.
To Vientiane, Laos, where he set up the Pepsi-Cola bottling plant as their lawyer for Pepsi-Cola out of Dallas.
And what were they bottling, Craig?
Well, the only thing they bottled was heroin.
Right.
and they were flying opium out of the Golden Triangle down to a place called Longqing, which was called Spook Haven or Spook City. It was out in the middle of the jungle. And from there, they would transport from the small aircraft to larger aircraft, and they would fly that to Vientiane, offload it, and take it to the Pepsi-Cola bottling plant. And there they would refine it into 100% heroin, and then would go out through different conduits. But the three main ones were Saigon #1 with Nguyen Cao Kie's personal airplanes flying out of Vientiane to Saigon, and it ended up in the veins of American troops. Then, when troops died, they would pack the coffins with bricks of heroin and send it to Travis Air Force Base, where people at Travis that were in on the deal would distribute it out from there and send it to wherever it's supposed to go. So the U.S. government was smuggling this stuff all the way to Travis. Then you had the other end, went down to Australia, and from there it went to Hawaii and different places like that. But there's another one, and it went to Corsica, France. And the guy's name was Black Luigi that ran that. He was in Team 101 with E. Howard Hunt and several others. I name them in the book. And that became the French Connection case when it hit New York City.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so all of this is interrelated. Then they started at a bank, and then it became the BRNDD or something like that. And then later on, it was the Bank of International, whatever, BCIC, whatever that was.
Mm-hmm. BCCI.
Yeah. BCCI. Mm-hmm. They did all of that. It's all, it all falls. It's dominoes that all fall in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you track that, then the guy that was running the operation in Vientiane was a CIA senior officer named Ted Shackley, who was also involved in the Phoenix program in Vietnam, doing assassinations.
Mm-hmm.
And his second in command was Tommy Kleins. And when we pulled out of Vietnam, they started shutting some of the operation down, and they moved them over to Bogota and Medellin, Colombia. And from there, they started running the cocaine operation for the CIA that later became Iran-Contra. So it's
all interconnected.
It's interconnected. When I was working on these books, I followed the money.
Yeah.
Followed the power. That's all you got to do.
Well, and Craig, I know somebody who spoke to Nixon and said, so what happened with that Kennedy assassination? And here's what he said. Both Lyndon and I wanted to become president, but I would never kill for that to happen.
Yeah. Well, he knew what was going on.
He knew exactly. And his payoff, because he knew, was to move into the presidency.
Right?
Mm-hmm. And I believe, Craig, and maybe I'm wrong on this, one of the reasons why he was pardoned is because he had his own kill switch. He said, you know what, if you don't pardon me, okay, you're going to get rid of me on this, okay, you're going to, okay. But here's the deal. You don't pardon me, we're going to let it out. What was really going on here. And you mentioned one of the players who was integral in that, because in Nixon, who was his director of the Central Intelligence Agency? George H.W. Bush, correct? Who happened to be the chairman of the Republican Party when Watergate happened. And you mentioned old man Bush, another guy who couldn't remember where he was in November of 1963, was on the ground in Dallas that day, correct?
Yeah, there's a picture of him standing in front of the Texas School Book Depository during the event, observing everything there. And then down in front of him to the right, you had the Umbrella Man. And now it was a nice day in Dallas,
right.
And he raises his umbrella and pulls it down just as Kennedy's car
makes
the turn, telling everybody, here he comes, because some of them couldn't see the curb, couldn't see the corner because of the freeway sign that was in the way, which the next day was taken down. We've never seen the freeway sign because there was a bullet hole in it. There's so many anomalies to this.
Well, and then how about the windshield? right?
Yeah.
So people say, well, if he really got shot from the front, there would have been a hole in the windshield. Well, when the car pulls into Parkland, and I've spoken to people that were at Parkland,
Yep.
they said there was a bullet hole in the front.
Yeah,
right?
a good friend of mine went down there as a reporter, and he went to Parkland, and the car was still at the emergency room. He said there was a bullet hole in the windshield, and the reason I know that is I put a pencil through it, and the car disappeared, and it ends up going back to Ford Motor Company or
in Detroit,
and they put a new windshield in that night. They did a bunch of cleanup on it and replaced any other piece of damage, including the frame around the windshield, which had a dent in it on the inside. So we didn't see that car again for 2 or 3 weeks, and it was flown back to Washington in a C-130. Yeah. So I mean, you look. I don't care what you look at in this thing. Every bit of it is got a flaw. And the media is the only thing that keeps it alive that Oswald did it, because they tell a lie over and over and over. And you know, I mean, here's a reporter. He's working for CBS. Kennedy anniversary comes up. Lee Harvey Oswald, blah, blah, blah. Because if he doesn't, he's going to get fired. He's got to read the script. And have you ever noticed, and this is to all your viewers and listeners, pay attention. Switch channels at certain times on the major networks, and you'll find out
it's all the same.
They tell the same story at the same time. They have a commercial at the same time. They're all coordinated. They're all scripted. They got teleprompters out there that come off a script, and they all cover the same thing. And the real important stuff you'll never see, like in Brazil right now. The people there, hundreds of thousands of people have taken over the capital. The military has been called in to try to suppress them. They had a fraudulent presidential election, and they found out the voting machines had all been rigged.
Shocking.
And they were the same company that did our voting machines. And if you go back, they'll say, well, it was found out they could be reprogrammed from where? Brazil. The company was tied in with Brazil. And I think they may have been made down there. I don't know. But, you know, we could go to a week worth of shows on just a stupid election. But we'll lead into the next thing, and that is this, because we can go from Dealey Plaza to Oklahoma City.
Right.
Because Oklahoma City was an off-the-shelf operation, and the reason I know that is because of all the stuff and all the research I did on Dealey Plaza.
And as I said in your intro, you were the only person from the Tulsa Police Department called in.
Yeah.
On that day.
Yeah. Well, 2 days later, happened on a Wednesday. The FBI paged me on a Friday. And the reason they paged me is because by then they had arrested Timothy McVeigh, and they had some kind of information that maybe he was tied in with some local militia groups. And the FBI knew they couldn't talk to these guys, but they knew I could, because I knew the SAC, the special agent in charge in Tulsa at the time, and his second in command, and they had both read Kill Zone. And then they read some other stuff I wrote, and they thought, hey, where do you get all your information? I says, from people and from research and from libraries. And I just follow the money. I follow the power. I see what's going on. And I go back and I try to put 2 and 2 together, because one thing you learn as a police officer, you know when you're being told to lie. You're a judge of character that can testify in court as an expert witness that somebody lied to you. And isn't it interesting that if you lie to the FBI, it's a felony, but the FBI can lie to you and then nothing happens?
All day long.
Yeah, all day long. So that's why I would never talk to the FBI about anything if I was involved in it, because no matter what I said, they could say, well, you lied about that. And if I couldn't prove otherwise, it's a felony. So why bother? The first thing I'd do is call a lawyer. Anyway, I got down to, they asked me if I would talk to these militia guys. And I said, sure, I will. What do you want me to find out? Well, one thing we want to know, where has Timothy McVeigh been in Oklahoma? Any time that he's come here, who's he stayed with? Where's he been? What did he do? Did he go to any of these meetings? Yada, yada, yada. I said, sure, I'll do what I can. So I called 2 or 3 people I knew that were involved in the militia movement, and met with them. One of them was Ross Hullett. He was down in Eufaula, Oklahoma. He had the Oklahoma State Militia. And another one was, there was a guy out of Michigan, actually, and another one from Montana, and another one, and several others, 3 or 4 others in Oklahoma itself. And I said, do you guys know anything about Timothy McVeigh? And no one knew who this guy was till he got arrested. And so the next thing that happened was I was one of the only officers on the department that had my own personal computer on my desk with a modem hooked to the fax line with an internet account. This is 1995, and the internet was pretty basic back then. Mm-hmm. We had Genie and CompuServe and stuff like that. Well, I put a message out, and one of the guys that got the message, his code name was Stryker, and he knew a lot of people in the right places, and he knew how to use the internet a lot better than I did at the time. And I said, I want the message to go out that if anybody knows anything about Timothy McVeigh or the Oklahoma City bombing, that they can call me direct in my office at the helicopter unit and to my desk phone, and I'll talk to them. I'd like to know if they know anything. I am not a Fed. I'm a local. So, bear that in mind. Well, about a week goes by, phone rings one morning, and I pick it up, and the guy says, are you Craig Roberts? I said, yes, I am. He said, well, I'm not going to give you my name, but I'll tell you what I am. I'm a federal agent. I'm not FBI. I'm not ATF. Well, that left DEA and IRS. Mm-hmm. And he says, I'm based in Little Rock. He says, I've got this message on my desk, and if you're sincere about this, I'll let you know this. And I'm paraphrasing some of this. Mm-hmm. Going a lot of years. He said, when we investigated the Clintons on all the drug running through MENA and all this Iran-Contra stuff.
Which was a CIA operation of which old man Bush had his hands in, right?
And Bush was vice president.
Right.
And they actually had a meeting in Arkansas that I knew about at Camp Robinson outside of Little Rock in a bunker during Iran-Contra, trying to figure out, what they're going to do with all the money, I guess.
Who was in the meeting?
I don't know, other than... They had MPs guarding the bunker, armed MPs guarding the bunker, and I know those 2 were there. I don't know who else was there. Anyway,
Clinton and Bush were there.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and it was all hush hush. No one knew what they were talking about, but I figured it had to be dope and money. Mm-hmm. And so he says we took all those records.
About the drug laundering, the money laundering coming into Mena, Arkansas. Okay.
The Clintons are involved in.
Uh-huh.
They're focusing on the Clintons. Uh-huh. So Clinton went to Washington. They had to back off. And so he told me they took all the records and they hid them in the Burr building in Oklahoma City because that would be the last place anyone would look. And now I never talked to him again after that. But I said, well, I wrote that down. I said, well, that's interesting. I wonder, yada, yada, yada. Well, I go back and I look on the timeline of things in Oklahoma City, and the explosions, the bombs, plural, mm-hmm. you want to call it that, the explosives went off at 9:03 and 9:04. Mm-hmm. Okay, so immediately everything was chaos down there. And I talked to a lot of people who went there immediately afterwards on the police department and on the fire department down there, and the big concern was victims. Let's get the victims out of there. Let's save lives, mm-hmm. and do what we can. And so the fire department hit them. The police department, the sheriff's office, the emergency workers, hospital staff members all show up. Okay, 1 hour later, the FBI pulls everybody back. There's other explosives in the building. We found another bomb. Everybody clear the area. Well, that was an excuse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because at that time, they pulled up 2-box ambulances. There were military style ambulances. I don't know if they were camouflage or painted black. I don't know. I don't know. But I know that I talked to an eyewitness who was on the 6th floor, who was the captain on the fire department down there, who refused to leave the building because he had a lady pinned under concrete he was trying to work with. And he saw them carrying file cabinets and boxes out of the building, putting them in these 2 vehicles, and then driving off. Now, there's not an office in that building that would have files so important that you would let people die.
Mm-hmm.
There had to be something else.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm 2 and 2 together. I got a federal agent calling me, telling one thing, and then here are the files being moved out at 10 o'clock, and there was an FBI agent named Gene Pogue, he was questioned about it. I've got the email on this. He was questioned, why are we leaving the people in there? He says, to paraphrase, it's unfortunate, but we have to do it. There's things that have to be brought out. Well, another thing they went after right away was the cameras.
Right. There's no video evidence.
No.
Right?
Even though
some things never change, Craig, because with this whole J6 thing, there's 14,000 hours reportedly, thousands of hours of videotape that they've tried to deep six now for 30 to 50 years. They always, because they learned from the Kennedy assassination with the Zapruder film, hey, wait a minute, you can manipulate it, but if there's some video evidence, God, we're in trouble, right?
Yeah. Well, I went down there and they had taken all the cameras off all the buildings around there. They had not only done that, they had pulled the wiring out of the walls. Then they plastered over the holes and painted them. So you couldn't even tell where a camera was if you didn't know about it ahead of time. And a good friend of mine, a sergeant in the Oklahoma City Police Department, he was a canine officer. He was one of the first guys in the building. Him and a guy named Terrence Shaggy were the first 2 police officers in the building. And he said that he watched them carry these file cabinets out. He also saw all the cameras, and he saw them taking the wiring out of the walls and painting over everything. So then I do more research, and I find out that the FBI takes all these VHS tapes. Oh, and supposedly the Murrah building security cameras weren't working that day.
No, of course not. Right.
Yeah, of course not. Yeah. And they probably worked.
It's like the security cameras for Epstein, right? Oh, they weren't working that day. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Well, they made 400 copies of these tapes. And I don't know where they put them, but obviously Washington got a boatload of them. But I don't even know why they made that many. I mean, what for?
Yeah, right.
And but this is a guy that's testified who owned the video shop that did the duplication process. And he said, I had an FBI agent standing over my shoulder the whole time. So he couldn't steal tape himself.
Right.
And they're from different various video cameras. So there might have been, 20 tapes from one area and 30 from another. I don't know. But the thing about it is, we know they got the tapes. Those are the Zapruder films. That's the Achilles heel of the Oklahoma City bombing. And there's a attorney in Las Vegas, friend of mine, and his name is Salt Lake City, Jesse Trentadue.
Mm.
He's the one whose brother was murdered in Oklahoma City at the prisoner transfer center, tortured to death and murdered by prison guards because they thought he was one of the Midwest bank robbers, which allegedly was part of the financing the Oklahoma City bombing, which is all nonsense. It was a false lead, but he was just in there for a parole violation, being transferred from back to California. Well, his brother is Jesse Trentadue, Vietnam veteran Marine, by the way, and he has filed lawsuit after lawsuit in federal court to get copies of those tapes. And the FBI, this has been going on for years, and he's still doing it. And the FBI, they keep saying, we can't find them.
Oh, just kind of like the Seth Rich laptop. Oh, we lost it.
Yeah.
That whole thing. Yeah.
Gee, we are so incompetent.
Yeah.
And so if we could ever get any of those tapes, it would show the main thing, who got out of the rider truck and how many.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the witnesses all say two.
Mm-hmm.
McVeigh and another guy, a Middle Eastern-looking guy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Also know that there's two rider trucks involved.
Mm.
One of them was seen driving around Bricktown, making sure that everybody down there saw this truck.
Yeah. Here I am.
Yeah. And it was driven by a guy named Dennis Mahon, and I knew him personally. He was in the KKK in Tulsa, Grand Dragon of all 8 members, I think. But he's doing 40 years in federal pen for making bombs now. But
and you had interactions with him as a police officer, him being a bad guy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And when I had a talk,
he was a known bad guy.
Yeah. And when I had a talk radio show, he'd call the station.
Oh, jeez.
And he'd start to give me a hard time. And I said, Dennis, I know who you are. I know where you live. Just remember that. Yeah. But he ended up moving to Arizona, where McVeigh had been to learn how to make more bombs and blow up stuff in the desert and everything like that. All this stuff is all interrelated, and it's the same players over and over.
So, Craig, Oswald was a cutout, right? He had ties in with our government, right? McVeigh, another cutout, right?
Yeah, Lee Harvey McVeigh.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It was the 90s version of the 60s version of Oswald.
He went out of his way to get caught.
Yeah.
He's speeding north on I-35 out of Oklahoma City with a car with no tag on it. Now, when it left Oklahoma City, it was a yellow Mercury. When it left Oklahoma City, it had a tag hanging by one bolt.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when he gets stopped by a trooper named Charlie Hanger, who was on his way to Oklahoma City when this guy went the other way doing 100 miles an hour, he gets out and he says, I want you to know that I've got a gun. And Hanger grabs his, says, I'll let you know I got one too. So put your hands on the paint. And that's when he found the Turner diaries, and he found a receipt for explosives and all the evidence that was planted in that car.
So why would McVeigh willingly get caught? Was it because he knew that if he got caught, it was already arranged that he would be
taken care of?
Taken care of?
One way or the other.
Yeah.
But, I'm sure he was told, you take the fall on this,
mm-hmm.
a little time in the joint, we'll get you out, and here's $1 million, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I got called back down to the FBI office shortly after this. They got McVeigh, and they had him in the Oklahoma County Jail. And the agent that I had to report to at the time, he says, that McVeigh's crazy. He's claiming to be a POW in a war, and he's complaining about a chip in his butt. And I said, well, have you checked him? He said, what do you mean? I said, does he have a chip in his butt? He says, there's no such thing. I says, run him in front of the X-ray machine.
Right.
And they said, well, Sheriff Richard Mack, he's requesting Sheriff Richard Mack to come and talk to him. And Mack calls me. I knew Mack, and I know Mack, and he's a good guy. Mm-hmm. And he called me up, and he says, hey, McVeigh, can you arrange this in Oklahoma? Because he's in Arizona. He says, can you arrange this where I can talk to McVeigh? He says, I've tried, he says, and they won't let me. They said they're not going to let me in. I said, well, I don't know. I'll find out. So I asked him, I says, why don't you bring Richard Mack in and let him talk? He says, because that's not the way we do things.
Who said that?
That FBI guy.
And did you ever speak to the FBI about this tip you had from this federal agent about the records and all that kind of stuff? Did that ever get to them, Craig?
When I did my final report to them, it was 28 pages long.
Uh-huh.
And it had that in there. And I gave them a lot of information, but when any law enforcement officer will tell you about the FBI, it's a black hole. Right. Stuff in, you get nothing back. And if you do get something back, it's a lie.
Yeah.
Or it's not factual.
Right.
So they're very thrifty about sharing anything.
And Craig, you talked about the dead witnesses in Dallas. You mentioned briefly a police officer in Oklahoma City who was a decorated police officer by the name of Terrence Yakey, correct?
Right.
Okay. Educate our listeners about Terrence Yakey and what happened to him.
Well, Yakey was, along with Don Browning, was one of the first 2 officers in the building. Mm-hmm. And he saw a lot of things in there that he shouldn't have seen.
Mm-hmm.
And he was told to forget about it by his own brass, that, if he says anything about that something would happen to him, it would go badly for him. His lieutenant, even the chaplain, there's more than one chaplain, but this one particular chaplain was not on his side. I'll put it that way in this whole deal. Try to talk him out of doing anything. Well, Yakey wrote down everything he did, and he took pictures. He always carried a camera with him. And I'm pretty sure what he saw were other explosives rigged to the columns that didn't go off.
Mm-hmm. They were pre-positioned.
Right. There's a lady named Jane Graham, and I interviewed her. She worked there, and she went to work one morning a few days before the bombing, and she saw 3 guys in the basement. And they had a ladder. They had GSA coveralls on. 2 of them did. The third one had all dressed in black with a cowboy hat and cowboy boots, tall, thin guy. And he was watching. And they were putting putty on the columns and stringing wire between them. And she thought that they're just putting in a new computer cable or a temporary phone line or something like that. She had no idea about C4 and det cord. And at the same time, by the way, there was a bunch of C4 that was missing out of Fort Riley, Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a little aside right there. When I talked to the people at Fort Riley, they told me that they were missing about half a pallet of C4 just before the bombing. But anyway, so we know that Yakey probably saw that stuff. And the reason they didn't go off is if you don't know what you're doing
mm-hmm.
and you cross det cord, it will blow the other one in half and it'll disconnect it.
Mm-hmm.
So not all the charges went off. That's why only the east side of the building, if you look at it, is the one with the most damage and the one that goes down 2 floors.
Because the plan was to take it all down, right?
Take it all down, but it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
But, of course, we don't have to worry about that because the FBI took the whole damn thing down later.
Right.
And then they buried it.
Right.
And then they posted guards on it and put a fence around the debris.
Right.
And I think the guards are still there, and they're whacking hut guards, the last I heard, which that's CIA.
Right.
Contractors. So, yeah. And so, when you start following all this, and in the book, the Medusa File 2, I cover everything.
Yeah, you do.
And what happened was my brother, 5 years younger than me, was in the Marines in Thailand, flying helicopters to rescue downed pilots in North Vietnam and the Ho Chi Minh Trail area and all that kind of stuff. Well, he was living in Mesa, Arizona, and he came down with throat cancer from Agent Orange and died here about 3 years ago now, I guess, 4 years ago. And after that, I thought, if I'm ever going to do this book, I better do it now because I'm not getting any younger.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had my own health issues.
Mm-hmm.
And when I retired, I had 5 file boxes full of case files on the Oklahoma City bombing. And I kept them when I retired and brought them home. They were mine because I was told when I was assigned to work with the Phoebes, I was told anything you do with them is have to be on your own time.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, fine. I'm not going to spend that much time on it. At least I didn't think so at that time
mm-hmm.
until I got really wrapped up in the case. And so I figured, well, since I did it on my own time, they're my files. They're going home with me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wrote a 28-page report summarizing everything. And I sent a protocol copy to my chief, who was not, I was not one of his favorite officers. I'll leave it at that. I was kind of a loose cannon at the time, still am. And went over to the FBI in Tulsa. The very next morning, I get a phone call from Chief's office. It's him. And he says, hey, who's seen this report? Well, just you and the FBI. He says, good. Shred it. I don't want anybody to ever see this again. Well, I had my problems with him. And I thought, okay, let me think about that. I did it on my own time. So I put it on the internet so anybody could read it at the time. It's on my website, by the way, if you want to read it.
Riflewarrior.com.
Right. You can go down to the very bottom and it says about, little tiny word. Click on that and that'll take you to the secret part. But anyway, so I had these files and I've had them for years. And so when I came home from Phoenix, I said, I'm going to write that book. And I sat down for 6 months, and I got all those files out, and I spread them out, and I put them in chronological order. My office looked like Agent Mulder out of the X-Files. I had stuff everywhere. And when I got done, I had my outline, and I had reports in there I forgot I even hadn't even read yet, from like Philippine intelligence, where Nichols went to the Philippines and met with Abu Sayyaf, and was financed by the Mexican mafia and the Abu Sayyaf people who are Muslims. And that they connect to the Middle Easterners who were seen at the scene in Oklahoma City of a PLO terrorist cell that lives in Oklahoma City. There's a Hamas group in Oklahoma City. It's one of the biggest in the country, and everybody knows about it. And they've had conventions down there. That stuff's going on, and you never hear about it.
Right.
Well, Nichols makes several trips to the Philippines. He had no money. He's a poor farmer from Kansas. And to the tune of $20,000 worth of hotels and airline expenses and so on and so forth, travel expenses, who paid for it? And then he comes back and he fills a drawer up with gold coins for his wife in case anything ever happens to him, and an envelope. And so the Philippine intelligence reports that surfaced, and I name them all, they interviewed Edwin Angeles, who was second in command of Abu Sayyaf, on his deathbed. And he said Nichols came here, we called him the farmer, and we had these meetings. He wanted to learn how to build bombs. And one of the other guys that was at these meetings was Ramzi Youssef. And he's the guy, if you think about the World Trade Center bombing in 1993, and Operation Bohica, where they were going to blow up a dozen American jumbo jets over the Pacific with bombs. Then you got his name was Abdul Bassett something or other. I name him his real name in the Medusa file too. I connect all these people all together, and I didn't do it by myself. Okay, I had a lot of help. I had a lot of different people doing things. In fact, I was working on a part of the case that was very interesting, and that was a friend of mine called me up. He was a colonel in Special Forces, and he says, "You need to talk to a guy I know that down in Texas. He's with the Texas State Police." And he gave me his name and his phone number. And he says, "Call him up, and he wants to tell you what he knows." Okay, fine. So I called him up, and he was expecting my call. And he says, "Look," he said, "there's a Mexican cartel lieutenant named Juan Garcia Abrego, who financed part of the bombing. He sent 2 Mexicans to Oklahoma City as bagmen with money to help finance the bombing to get rid of those records." And now he didn't say records. I put it in my mind right then. That's what I went there for. Cocaine records, okay? So, and then there was a report from a hotel desk guy in Oklahoma City who says it was really funny. This one night, these 2 guys showed up dressed as Arabs, and they were Mexicans.
There you go.
So there's number 2 on the puzzle. So I wrote up this report, but I didn't have the spelling. I'd written down Arbigo, Arbigo, Juan Garcia Arbigo, and I take it to my contact at the FBI, and I said, "Look this guy up, see if you know who he is." I did a 1-page memo of what my conversation was. Week goes by, I don't hear anything, so I go back over there and I say, "What did you find out?" And he says, "We don't know him. He's nobody, and don't know anything about him. He's not in our files." He said, and I'll never forget this word, "It's all hokum."
Oh.
I'll never forget that word because I never heard it before or since. And so anyway, I said, okay, fine. And so I get a call about a week later from Dave down in Texas, and he says, "Look," he says, "there's the sheriff of Fort Worth wants to meet with you." He said he may be able to help you on the case because he knows about Arbigo, and he says, "By the way, it's Abrego, Abrego, Juan Garcia Abrego." I said, "Oh, okay." So I wrote that down. I did a 2.5-page memo, took it back to my guy at the FBI. I said, "Here's his real name. Look him up." And a few days go by, and I said, "What'd you find out?" "No, still nothing on him." Okay. Well, I took time off and went down to Fort Worth, and I met with the sheriff down there, and nice guy, good Christian gentleman. Uh, his chief, they took me into a big conference room with a whole bunch of deputies in there. They had the chief deputy and they had the undersheriff and this. Well, the chief deputy or the undersheriff, one, their brother was killed by these cartel members down on the.
Mm-hmm. He had a score to settle.
Yeah. And so he wanted to make sure something happened about it. And he says his information is that they were supplying money and whatever was needed to help with the Oklahoma City bombing, but I don't know why. I said, well, I'll tell you why. It's the records that were in the building would link this guy to the cocaine smuggling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
His name popped up on the original reports.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, that makes perfect sense. And several other things went by. It's all in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Several other things went by at this particular time. So a couple of months go by, and I'm working with a bunch of people down in Oklahoma City. Well, I call them the Baker Street Irregulars. They were victims, they were witnesses, they were concerned citizens of various positions, and all of them were always gathering more intel for me. Mm-hmm. And another guy down there was David Hoffman. He was the editor-in-chief of the Hyde-Ashbury Free Press, Jewish guy, super great guy, as liberal left-wing as you could get, but he was my exact opposite. We ended up clicking. We worked together, and he would go, if I investigate something, I go into the harbor in a submarine, I raise my periscope, and I look all around. He goes in like a battleship with all guns blazing and lets everybody know he's there. He doesn't care. Yeah. If we got a question of a general in the Pentagon, he'll call him up, things like that. And I guess, Dave, one of these days you're going to get killed. You can't just blindly shoot in the dark and expect nothing to come back.
Right.
But anyway, he's one of the guys. He's in the book. I called him the rabbi, and we started putting all this stuff together. And a couple of weeks later, I have to fly down to Mesa, pick up a new helicopter, and fly it home with my partner. So we go down there. We're down there for a week because we got to track rotor blades. We got to get the avionics installed. We got to make sure everything works and everything before we try to fly it home. It's brand new. And so one day we're flying northeast to Phoenix, and I'd never flown up there before. And it's beautiful. It's not desert at all. It's mountains and pine trees and all that, waterfalls, everything up there. Well, this is really cool. And so we had the doors off, and we turn around and we start going back to Mesa, to McDonnell Douglas. And I look up ahead, and here's this big brown wall of a dust storm coming straight at us. And we're going to go through it. And all of our instruments haven't really been checked out real well, but we're going to have to go, map, compass, and knee-jerk reaction on this thing, stick, pedal, and rudder. But anyway, we fly into this, and we got dirt everywhere. Then it starts raining. Now we got mud everywhere. It's getting all over us, the cockpits, everything. And we went in basically on instruments, broke out the other side, landed, and we're filthy. So we get back to the hotel, the motel, and the first thing I do is turn on the news. The second thing I do is to strip off my flight suit. Right. And as I'm pulling the zipper down, I look up, and here are two FBI agents, got a guy between them with a jacket over his head. They brought him off an airplane. They had just extradited him out of Mexico, and his name was Juan Garcia Abrego.
And this is the guy they knew nothing about when you presented to them months before.
Right. So we fly home over Saturday and Sunday. Monday, I go to work. I had to pay some bills, so I stopped at the post office. And I look up, and on the wall right in front of me is a wanted poster for the FBI, 10 most wanted list, Juan Garcia Abrego. And so,
what happened to him? Did they pull an Epstein on him, or what happened? What?
He's still in prison.
Is he?
As far as I know. Anyway, I asked the postmaster for the poster. I go straight home. I get both of those memos I'd already submitted, my copies.
Right.
Went straight to the FBI office, and I got my guy out there, Pete. And I said, Pete, you remember when I gave you this memo, and you said you didn't know who he was? And I said, yeah. I said, now you remember when I gave you this one with the correct spelling, and you told me he's not in the system, and you didn't know who he was? He said, yeah. You said it was hokum, right? He says, yeah. I says, then explain this. This is your wanted poster. He's been wanted for a long time by the FBI. And Pete, you lied to me.
What'd he say?
He just looked at me, kind of stunned look. And I said, I can't trust you. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to work with you anymore. So we're divorced. I'm going to do my own thing from now on, Pete. And you won't be able to know what I'm up to. Before, you knew everything I did. Now you don't, because you sicked me on a case. And when you put the pit bull on a case, you can't pull the pit bull off. Mm-hmm. That's the way I am. And I walked out of the office. The poster is in the book. And my meeting with him, by the way.
And he retired, full retirement, I'm sure, full benefits, everything, right? A stellar FBI agent, right?
Yeah, see, it's been over 20 years ago, so yeah, I'm sure he's retired. They all are.
You know, Craig, if we go back to the very beginning here, the end of our time together today, I quoted this source to Tucker Carlson, and he said, "It's a whole different country from what we thought it was. It's all fake."
Yeah.
That frankly, Craig, is an understatement. It's not just all fake, because you are living proof of this, of what you've uncovered over many years' time. It's all fake. It's all a lie. And it's all criminal.
Yeah.
That's what the government is.
The alleged media is the propaganda arm of the New World Order.
Yeah.
That's to sum it all up.
Yeah.
People say, and it's like the COVID-19 stuff. In 1985 or thereabouts, I remember reading about a conference that was held in San Francisco by some organization that had to do with World Health or something like that. And there was a woman that was speaking, and she said, we have to reduce the Earth's population by 80% by the year 2025. And we have the means to do it. We are the riders of the pale horse. Now, for those that don't know the Bible, pale horse isn't white, it's green, and it stands for pestilence, which means germs, sickness, disease. And so if you invent a disease to let it loose on the world and it's not effective enough, you invent a vaccine that helps carry it along. And if that doesn't work, you invent a booster that makes it even more so. And you get down to the third and fourth booster. Right. By now, you've got cancer and heart attacks all over the globe, and it just seemed to crop up out of nowhere. And I tell people this. Friends of mine that took the stupid shot, I said, look, it's an experiment, number one. Number two, it hadn't been tested on anything. Number three, we don't know what's really in it. And if you get it, they won't even give you a flyer in the box to tell you what's in it. Mm-hmm. And the doctors don't even know what's in it. And True. You're going to trust your body to the government? Yeah. Well, you got to have it. It's all over TV. You got to have it. I said, you're an idiot.
And they're an idiot, and they have no functional knowledge of history. No. If they had 1/1000th of the knowledge of history that you do, Craig, and have presented to the public, whether it's what happened to Dealey D, what happened in the Murrah building in Oklahoma City, what happened with the Pan Am flight, what happened, what you name it, what happened with the World Trade Center, what happened with the... If they had 1/1000th of your historical knowledge base, they never, ever would have bought into the coercion, into the rhetoric, into the flat-out lies that has been perpetuated for the past 3 years of late.
Well, you know, it really irritates me that you've got these people that they condemn anybody that's an election denier, that says it was fraudulent, it was stolen. Well, they condemn you for that, but they don't do their own research.
No,
they don't see what really happened. I mean, how can a guy that spends all the time in his basement end up becoming president after thousands upon people go to the Trump rallies and vote? I mean, that doesn't make sense right there. No. These people go along with it. Oh, he's the president, and then I look at Fox News. And they keep calling him President Biden.
Yeah, I know.
He's not my president.
No, he's not mine either. No, he was not elected. He was installed, but he was not elected.
No.
Now, Craig, educate our listeners in how they can follow, how they can get your books, how they can follow you, and how they can get that 28-page report that the syndicate does not want anyone to see.
Well, the report's also in the first Medusa file book. It's a chapter. And the first Medusa file book, Crimes and Coverups, U.S. Government, starts in World War II and goes all the way up through TW-800 shoot down. And I did say shoot down. Mm-hmm. And it covers all kinds of stuff that happens in between. It does not cover the Kennedy assassination, because the Kennedy assassination was a standalone book that led into the Medusa file too. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. When I asked myself if they lied to me about this, what else have they lied about? And that led me into the Medusa file, book, which originally was Legacy of Dishonor was the title. But I sent it to my agent in New York City, and he took it to several different publishing houses, and they wouldn't touch it.
Of course not.
And then
we can't let the truth out.
The editor at Simon & Schuster called me from his house phone on a Saturday and says, "You got to get this book out." And I said, "Well, Paul, if you like it, why don't you take it?" He says, "I can't. You step on too many toes. You name too many names." He says, "I'd lose my job." He says, "We have CIA people in every publishing houses called, I think it's Mockingbird or something like that."
Mm-hmm. Operation Mockingbird.
Yeah, that make sure none of this stuff ever sees the light of day. Mm-hmm. So I ended up using what savings I had at the time to take the first third out, which was the Kennedy assassination, and that's Kill Zone, and I had that published, and that did so well and distribution that it financed the second 2/3, which is the Medusa file and Crimes and Coverups of the U.S. Government, and so. They're all available on Amazon. I don't sell anything through my website, but if you go to riflewarrior.com, and that's one word, Rifle Warrior, and go down to the bottom, and you'll see articles, you'll see about. Click on about, little tiny word. It'll take you to another section, and from there you can read articles I've written. You can read about the different books, all kinds of stuff there. I don't hold anything back. And all the books are on Amazon. If you just type in Craig Roberts author or Medusa file or Kill Zone, it'll bring them all up. Now, I've got novels on there that they didn't do so good, but hey, what the heck? Anyway, I had fun writing them anyway. You got to take a break sooner or later.
That's right.
And so all the books are there, and they're very reasonable. I don't charge an arm and a leg for a book. I just want to get the information out.
Right.
So that's the best way to do that.
Craig, I'd like to thank you for all your years of service in the military and in the Tulsa Police Department, and your years of service during what some people would call their retirement years. They have continued to be your patriot years. Craig, there are many people that talk the talk. There are all too few people who walk the walk, and then there's the rare individual who runs the marathon. And you are our country's most prolific marathon runner, I believe, in our country's history.
Well, thank you.
And I thank you for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. And I thank you for your perseverance, dedication, and sacrifice, and for always putting every American and every person of the world ahead of your own safety and welfare. You are incredibly, not just patriotic. You are patriotic, but you're an incredible humanitarian, and I thank you for that.
Well, I'll part with this one last bit. People ask me when I do lectures or they read my stuff that how come I'm still alive, and
go back to your granddaddy.
My response to that is I was getting ready to go to Vietnam as a young Marine. I was on leave in East Tennessee on my grandpa's front porch, and he's a primitive Baptist preacher, hardshell, and he was whittling, sitting in his rocking chair, and I'm sitting on a step and said, "Son, you all getting ready to go to that Vietnam place, ain't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Them Vietnam boys, they going to be trying to kill you." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, you don't got to worry none." And I said, "I don't?" And he says, "Nope. good Lord calls you home, no one can stop it. And if he ain't ready, no one can rush it. And I've lived my life with that.
And you know what, Craig? I have as well. I thank you. I thank you for everything. You are such a great friend and such a great American and such a great person to the world. I thank you for spending time with us and educating us and empowering us in the process. And I thank you folks for joining us. Until next time, Dave Janis signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.